So what I see for the future of audio and music listening, if there is to be a civilization, um, is stacks of instrumentation. And it's not like people think, where it's going to be a couple of small things here and there. But I created a concept long ago called DeepTrax, where DeepTrax meant you could have many elements, kind of like an opus that's built into a track. Many construction elements, because it's just like in remixes, they used to take parts of the original track and just make remixes from that original track, like whatever content was available for the production. But now it's gone in completely new directions, and they're providing new material for remixes and supplementing it. But anyways, so DeepTrax was the concept to make, like, let's say, one huge track that has like 100 different elements in it, and you would have supportive elements to augment the full experience. So with DeepTrax meant you could have multiple styles of music per track, which meant you'd have one version that's such and such genre and another version that's another genre. And that would be but the same track. That's the trick with DeepTrax. And then also DeepTrax had additional supportive material. So if you had a theme, you might have extra instruments playing that theme. And that would be like maybe not just one instrument, but two or three or four, or, the sky's the limit. Now this next concept is still really DeepTrax, but it's like the exponential component, where you have a system. Let's call it the selection system, the selector, to use a bad word, because the selector is a track that gatekeep. The selector is an instrument that gatekeeps the music industry, or is one of them. But the selector in this context would be a system where you'd have certain definable track limits, let's say 20. And each of those elements would represent certain sections of the production. And so you'd have a bass, you'd have drums, you'd have the leads, you'd have the guitars, you'd have the backing stuff, whatever. And so from that, you would have your basic, let's say, 10 to 20 elements. But where DeepTrax or this new mixing on the fly concept comes into play is you'd have additional material that would be in the shadows, that would either be very low in volume, which could be brought up, or it would just be a separate track. And you would then just mix in that track and replace the other track. Because what you have to do with audio is a summation process where you can have many things going on, but eventually you have too much gain. And so what happens there is the system creates clipping and abnormalities, and it masks things in weird ways. So that's why you'd really ideally want to have a system where you have 20 designated instruments and you swap between, let's say, 100, and you go from that pool of 100 to consolidate to that 20 instruments. So DeepTrax would mean if you had like a Casio keyboard, and then you have an instrument, the regular instrument version. Okay, now you have 20 instruments that are regular and 20 instruments that are Casio keyboard. And so those would swap out the other instruments. So if you'd swap out the drums, you'd swap, et cetera, et cetera. So that's the beauty of it. So that's just one genre or one concept to make a Casio version, right? Something very silly. Or you could have an 8-bit version, which is similar. You could have an orchestral version. You could have a hip-hop version. You could have, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And the trick with DeepTrax is to sync these instruments in their track lanes so that they'll be swappable on the fly, or just less obviously replaced. So that when you put the track in, timing-wise, key signature-wise, and rhythmically, it's always going to fit. So that's part of the beauty of production, is you have so much that you have to carve out to make the final production. Whereas with this concept, it's more limitless. So if a person wants to hear a particular song that day, they're kind of creating their own mashed up version with the deeper tracks of the song. Now this could have a randomizer component, where all the elements come from different genres, or you could just simply swap the genre. So you go from hip hop to pop or orchestral just by the touch of a button or something, or it's just all blended in there very subtly, and then they can just pull it out with various knobs. These are all very unfleshed out concepts, but the key idea is that the production can be morphable. So you have a morphogenic approach to the final product. Now this can go all the way into the new era of radio, to where the genre doesn't have to be the genre slider that goes around the AM FM stations. What it can be is the genre slider is built into the song itself. So and then because of your own desire to do certain things, you may want that a particular way that involves mixing those genres. So we're not talking about remixing the track or creating new rhythmical ideas, although some of that may be introduced through this track layering. But what we're talking about is just swapping the genre or morphing through genres. It's a totally different concept. So not only would it be like 100 tracks, but in reality, we're talking about maybe 1,000, 2,000, 3,000 tracks, however many genres that track holds in its little capsule, in its framework. That's how many thousands of tracks you could have, so that you could swap out those genres on the fly. So that is the power of DeepTrax. So you could take any song and do a DeepTrax version. Now some songs are going to be more transferable and portable to this concept. But the thing is with musicians is we know how to make these new arrangements or covers or new mixtures, and we know how to do it in our own way. And so we can always take something and make it into something else that it wasn't meant to be. And that's part of the beauty of this painting process in music, is creativity. So that's why it's another way to revitalize old material, but it's also just another way to experience music as a whole. So it's not even just about the fidelity anymore. Now we're talking about truly experiencing a unique piece of music. So there's just so much going on with the dynamic quality in the listening experience of music. I think that's the new era, is the dynamic changes that occur based on the listener's preference.